Welcome to another one of these in the series of Phi Beta Mu Legacy Project interviews. My name is Frank Buck, and I'm pleased to have with me this morning Rush Gavin. Rush, welcome.
Thank you, Frank.
For those who have heard some of the previous interviews, the idea behind this project is to spotlight those members of the Phi Beta Mu Hall of Fame. And in amongst all these interviews, a lot of the same names keep coming up again and again as one Hall of Fame member has talked about others who made a difference in their life. The story behind this interview this morning with Rush Gavin is that Glenn Spiller called me a few months back and he says, there's somebody who's not a Hall of Fame member, but my gosh, the information in his head, particularly about South Alabama bands, he says, Frank, you have got to interview Rush Gavin because nobody else is going to know the kinds of things he has. So, Rush, that's what brings us together today.
Well, I
Um,
am honored to be included in this interview.
Absolutely. Let me start by asking you the same thing that I have asked throughout all the other interviews because at some point you were just a young boy like every other young boy who hadn't started band yet, but then there was something that happened. Tell us about how you got started in music.
Well, my mother and daddy were big singers, gospel singers. And actually, I can remember as an early age attending singing schools because I was raised and educated mainly in Mobile County. But I remember one time apparently whoever was teaching this singing school saw me waving my hands and he put me on the table, let me play like I was conducting the group sing. And that's my first recollection of doing something musical. I'm sure I wasn't singing well because I was probably a small kid, but as far as my introduction to band, and I was in the elementary school in Chickasaw, Alabama, at the during World War II and at the end of World War II. And of course, the veterans were coming home, and one of the veterans happened to be my uncle, G.H. Gavin,
Hmm.
and he was finishing his degree on the GI Bill at Livingston to become a band director. And he became the band director at Chatham, Alabama, Washington County High School. And I guess that's what kind of spurred me along because GH and my dad were really close. They were close in age and they visited a lot back and forth. But I actually began band at Chickasaw in the fifth grade with Fred W. Addison. And
Okay.
Fred was Mr. Addison to me, of course, was kind of in and out of my life for the next 40 years, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
You know, and Rush, you bring up a good point. When you mention World War II and that war ending and people are coming home, and if we look at the band movement as a whole, the end of World War One, when all those military folks and all those military bandsmen are coming home, boy, that's what really kicked off the band movement nationwide. You know,
Yes,
we and then of course then World War II and the war ends, that feeling of patriotism and a lot more bands, high schools that didn't have a band or they discontinued band because of the war and everything. It was a time to get things up and going
yes,
again. Yeah.
yes. And one
Chatham. Mhm.
one fact that a lot of people don't realize, at the end of World War II, there was not a single high school band from Mobile to Tuscaloosa. All up and down that west side of the state, there was just no bands.
Mhm.
And my uncle GH started the band in Chatham in 1947, which happens to be the year I started band at Chickasaw with Mr. Addison.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was just sparse as far as music was concerned. There was no instrumental program. But getting back to my part, and we'll go talk about GH some more because
Yeah.
he was one of the founding members of ABA,
Mhm.
believe it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Now, no, you moved on to another high school, and there's a particular director that you had that a lot of people will know, but they
well,
won't remember her
oh,
at
I
that
got
particular
one
school.
between there that could be. I was kind of like the wandering minstrel out
Okay.
of Makata, if you're familiar with that musical. And I went from place to place because Dad was always getting a better job, more pay. And in 48, the next year, when I was in the sixth grade, we moved to Jackson. And
Uh-huh.
lo and behold, they were starting a band at Jackson under Henri Mayton, a
Okay.
graduate of Mississippi Southern.
Uh-huh.
And Mr. Mayton said to me, "You already play trumpet?" I said, "Yes, sir, I play trumpet." He said, "Well," says, "tell you what we'll do, since we're starting the band, I'm gonna put you on tuba and I'll give you
Okay.
trumpet lessons on the side. So you can play trumpet a little bit every week and tuba a little bit." And I actually ended up playing a tuba solo at the spring concert that year, Asleep in the Deep. I'll never forget it. I was in the sixth grade. I still remember the title, Asleep in the Deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really liked Mr. Mayton. He was World War II vet, just got out of college and all this stuff. He was instrumental in getting a lot of things done in Clark County.
Uh-huh.
But lo and behold, the next year we moved to Butler, Alabama, and I found myself in another beginning band program. And it
Okay.
was a lady named Blanche Simmons, which became a very famous band director in Alabama.
Oh, absolutely. There's
And
another Phi Beta Mu Hall of Fame
yeah,
member right
and
there. Yeah.
I remember our first meeting with Blanche, and I told her my name, and she said, "Oh, G.H. Gavin's your daddy." I said, "No, he's my uncle." So she already knew
Mm-hmm.
Uncle G.H. down there. So I tell her my story. I can play trumpet and I can play tuba. And she said, "I cannot believe it."
Mm-hmm.
She said, "Would you be interested in learning to play percussion? And you can play your trumpet and the tuba as you want to. And you can help
Uh-huh.
me teach the other drummers because you can
Wow.
already read
Yeah.
rhythms."
Now, this is probably the first time in history that a band director ever said, "Now you play tuba, but could we use you on percussion instead?" Usually it's the other way around.
Yeah, I know. It's really odd. And, so to keep things more interesting, mother put me taking piano that year also because I already could read music a little bit, read treble clef, bass clef, and rhythm. So I began studying piano as well. And at that time, they had a piano teacher that taught at the Butler Elementary School, although she wasn't employed by the school system. And she had a full time job there. And kids would go from the elementary class. I was in seventh grade at that time. And the elementary school was right across the street from the high school, like most small communities have. But I was there with Miss Simmons for 2 years, seventh and eighth grade. And Daddy decided to move back to Mobile County.
Yeah.
I ended up in Citronelle, Alabama, of
There
all
you go.
places.
And then
home
Rush,
Tommy Brannon.
absolutely. And but before we go to Citronelle, while we're talking about Blanche, and I hope everybody who's listening to this interview, if the name Blanche Simmons is not familiar to you, you got some homework to do. Because
Right.
first of all, there weren't many female band directors back in the day. We got tons of them now. But it all had to start somewhere. And Blanche Simmons, I mean, she was one of the pioneers. And
Yeah.
those of us who do know Blanche, we remember her well from Fairhope. Yep.
Right.
And and those established band directors that you say, oh, well, I know why they've got such a fabulous band. They're in a fabulous area. Well, the way you get one of those jobs is at first you got another job. And so Butler, I mean, she started the band from the beginning.
Yes.
Was it? So, I mean,
She had
four,
taught. She had
four,
taught 1 year or 2 years
yeah,
prior to that in Mississippi, so
yeah,
she wasn't a beginning teacher. She
yeah.
had already had a few bumps in the road.
Mhm. So just a couple of years she's been teaching, comes in, she's starting a band program from scratch. Everybody's a beginner, except for the kid who already plays the
Yeah,
trumpet and the
kind of
tuba.
the oddball in the group, but you'll in this conversation you'll see later on it paid off. But going back to Blanche, I think
Yeah.
she was at either Leakesville, Mississippi, or Loosedale.
Okay.
But she went to Mississippi Southern also for her degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Anything in particular that stands out in your mind? Looking back after all these years, what what did Blanche do that made her band so successful?
one thing, Blanche just had a rapport with the students. I mean, they liked her, she liked them, she'd hug your neck, want to know what you're doing, all these things. And she was well liked in the community at Butler, really.
Okay.
In fact, I still know two living members of that first band. And when we talk about Blanche. After all of these,
Yes. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
love Blanche Simmons. And she was just
Absolutely.
wonderful. And at the time, she was the only female band director in Alabama.
I believe it. Yeah.
That would be, and let's see, I made notes here, 49.
hmm And I'll tell you an interesting Blanche story. I was in the audience at state contest one year with her Fairhope band, and I forget what they were playing, but they got to one particular point, and it was like the people in the audience turned to each other and they were going like, "Did they just stop?" No, I don't think they stopped because they got back so quickly. And it turned out what had happened was, because Blanche said this afterwards. Now they made straight ones, but there was a particular point where the trumpets were looking for a cue from her. The light got in her eyes, and she missed giving the trumpets this cue. Half the trumpets came in, half the trumpets didn't. So what are you going to do on stage at state contest? So in the blink of an eye, she somehow cuts the band off, tells them where to start, and starts right back in. Because it was like they sort of it was like, didn't they just play that four measures? They've jumped up, they've jumped back and played it again. So what? And it was so quick that the audience members were debating about whether or not the band had stopped or not. And if they had, could they still make a superior rating? Well, they made all superior ratings as well. They should have, but something about the attention to the director on the podium was obviously so good
Yeah.
that she was able to do that. Yeah, yeah.
Well, getting
And of course,
back to Blanche, she carried the Butler Choctaw County High School band to state contest the second year.
mm,
I have a picture that come out of the Choctaw Advocate of the band on stage at Foster Auditorium the second year Blanche had the band. And the reason I cherish this picture, I'm sitting first chair trumpet, and I can see myself, so I'm glorying in my own ego there.
Mhm,
But that's the kind of teacher she was. She was really thorough, and she
mhm.
didn't, you know, she was a very good disciplinarian. And
I
I don't
can,
ever remember her being mad with anybody. Everybody was afraid of Blanche.
well,
Um,
they respected her, they
Right.
loved her, she loved them, but there was that element of there was obviously some expectations there and some consequences. If you didn't do what you were supposed to be doing, something happened. She still loved you,
Yeah.
and
Well,
she
I think
loved you enough you weren't going to be able to get away with foolishness.
I'm old enough to know now, looking back, she had to be under tremendous pressure, being the only female
Uh-huh.
and having to compete in a male's world. And most of those band directors were veterans, been to
Uh-huh.
war, seen all kind of bad things.
Yep.
But she just did a wonderful job. And of course, mom being related to GH Gavin, I think she had a little special feeling for me
Probably,
because
yeah.
of that thing. But to move along, if if anybody wants to see that Choctaw County High School first band from Butler to go to it's in the files at Choctaw Advocate, which was the newspaper in that day. It's called
Wow.
something else now.
Yeah.
But I also have a copy of it, so that makes
And
it worthwhile.
I tell you one thing, Rush, after this interview, if you'll email me a link to that, I can go into Blanche's bio on the Phi Beta Mu Hall of
Mm,
Fame page, and I can add a little link there. And then also for those who don't already know, over on that website, we've got all the old state contest programs. So we could actually go back to that the year
that
you were talking about, second year this school has a band, and not only go to district contests, but they get through district they and go to state contests. Now, see, for most of it, it's like, well, the school they've always had a band program, forever and ever and ever. So if you can imagine, one year we don't even have a band. The next school year, we're going to state contest with second year players.
and the nice thing about it, and I think the young directors in the age we're in right now would be amazed. We had tubas, we had three tubas, we had French horns, we had trumpets, clarinets, only had four drummers, but we had a timpani player.
Huh?
Yeah, that's Blanche's planning. She laid out the plan with the beginner band. I've got to have this, like building a house. And if you don't have tubas, you don't have foundation. So
Right. Yeah.
that's just some more of her good work. But unfortunately, I had to leave Blanche, and we went to Citronelle, Alabama.
Citronelle. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Yeah.
The only band director, I do not remember his name, but I can see him. He wore real thick glasses.
Uh-huh.
And I think he actually retired out of Mobile County, but I think he only taught citronelle part time, maybe half a day there and
Okay.
then half
Yeah.
a day. I really don't know. I have very little re- remembrance of the Spanish. I know the year I was there, we didn't play for anything, didn't play
Uh-huh.
for a ball game. So I'm thinking it was part time job.
Could be because
I
there was a
was
lot of that back
I
in
was
back in
only,
that day. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was only there for a year. And then guess who shows up in my life again? I go to Viger, and there's Fred Addison.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
And
the
now, of course, you mentioned Citronelle. And of course, I knew from the time I was in beginning band, Tommy Brannon, another
right.
Phi Beta Mu Hall of Fame member,
And I knew
graduate of
Tommy when
Citronelle
he
High
was in
School.
high school.
But there's something I didn't know until you told me during a conversation with who Tommy's band director was at Citronelle.
Troy Oil.
Troy's Hoggle, who was there. I know Troy's was also at Chatham, which was evidently a real kicking program back in the
It
day.
was in those
Small
days.
school,
Those
but where I guess some of these small towns where you go home in the afternoon. Well, there's no internet.
right,
There's no, what are you going to do when you go home in a small town? And so we'll get your trumpet out and practice.
right.
And because the guy sitting next to you is doing the same thing and
Yeah,
he's playing that lick that he's playing Bugler's Holiday and you're having a little trouble with that. So
yeah.
there's kind of a standard there that's just unbelievable. But Troy's,
Well,
mhm.
I tell you, I went to college with Troy's, but when I was in Citronelle, I went to high school with a girl that was a couple of classes ahead of me, but she and Troy's married each other years later. Her
Wow.
name was
Yeah.
Carmen Underdunk, and her daddy
Okay.
was the Dodge dealership. And Carmen became a home ec teacher, went to Chatham to teach. Troy goes to Chatham, and they get married. And there, I
Hmm.
knew his wife, and I knew him. It's crazy, but that's
Yeah.
one of the great things about me looking back on my life. I met so many people in so many different towns and areas, and somehow we got all tied together. Like
Hmm.
when I left Citronelle and I went to Viger as a 10th grader, there was 4 or 5 of my classmates from Chickasaw Elementary School. So it was kind of like just going back into the same band. And of course, Mr. Addison was just a great guy. He was a little short guy, Italian. He could really get mad about things. And he didn't mind stepping on your toes if
Yeah.
need be. But I really enjoyed that. And Mr. Addison had a second job. He was band director of the 31st Dixie Division National Guard Band.
Wow.
That's how I got introduced to the National Guard. As soon as I turned 16, he recruited me into that band that at that time was in Mobile. It had been later moved to Montgomery, but I had him as a guard band director and a high school band director. And to
Absolutely. Yeah.
skip ahead 40 years later, when I retired from the National Guard, he came to my retirement. He was 90 years old. He drove by himself from Mobile to
Hmm.
Montgomery to my
My
retirement and
goodness.
back to Mobile. So
Yeah.
I never got rid of Mr. Addison, or Mr. Addison never could get rid of me. One,
There you go.
we
Yeah.
just went through all of these schools and times were changing and career comes along and
Hmm.
it was, but at that time there was only that, as I recall, Murphy High had a band, Baker had a band,
Hmm.
there was a band at some garden, black band, and there was a band at the Central High, I believe. There was about 5 bands in Mobile. And of
Hmm.
course, once career ended, Mobile just flourished. They built Davidson and all those other high schools, and it
Yeah.
just banned everywhere. And up and
Hmm.
down the west side, every school, except one school, Leroy, Alabama. And we'll get to that later because that is a star in my crown.
There
If I
you
have
go.
a star in my crown, that's it.
Tell me a little more about Mobile, because you said for a long time there just weren't any bands down
Right.
there, And then, of course, as I'm coming through school in the mid late 70s as a junior high and high school student, at state contest there on Saturday afternoons, there they were. There was Davidson, there was Shaw, there was Murphy. It was like, boom,
McGill Toolen,
McGill.
UND.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
so tell
Well,
us the story. Who
well,
who were the people, and what kind of made that go from
well, you
pretty much
see, I'm not
nothing
worth
to
moving yet. I
mm-hmm,
left Mobile, moved back to Butler.
mm-hmm.
My senior year, I was in school at Butler, and I was elected band captain
Ah,
because all
yeah,
those guys that I've been in school with before, they knew Rush. Hey, Rush is
yeah,
coming back. Why don't we make
yeah.
him band captain? You know,
There you go. Yeah.
and it was a lady named Mary Pope Reed. She was a piano player. She was not
Yeah.
a band director. And this my senior year, me and the other seniors, it was about 6 or 8 of us, we wrote the band shows. We selected the music for Christmas concert. She directed the band. But
Wow.
she
Yeah.
she had no background in band at all. She had
Mm-hmm.
background keyboard and she did a good job with it.
Mm-hmm.
Considering she was handicapped, not being as we say, a bando.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But when I was getting ready to graduate from high school at Butler, I had intended to follow my daddy in profession. My daddy was a mechanic, automobile mechanic. Plus, he put engines in ships in the shipyard during World War II, and he had a lot of construction in his background. But along about the middle of the second semester, Livingston State Teachers College came
Mm-hmm.
to Butler to play a concert, and GH was the director. And after the concert, I went out with him to the bus. It wasn't a big band, about 30 of them, maybe at most. And he was introducing me to this guy and that guy and this guy. And he introduced me to Troy Hoggle.
Mm-hmm.
He introduced me to James Thompson.
There's another one of those names that keeps
A
coming
guy named
up in
Gene
every
Shell.
interview.
Gene Shell was on there. And Rush Hurst,
Oh,
which used to be band director at Brookwood. And it was just, and he said, you ought to come to college. Says, I know you're planning on going to work with Roy. That was my dad's name. Said, but I can give you a work study program and you won't have to pay a dime. You can go to college. And well, I said, okay,
mhm.
okay, that sounds good. I'll try it. It didn't work out. I can always go back to work with dad. You
Sure.
know what my work study program was? And you're going to love this. I became the band director at Livingston High School at
Wow.
age 18 years old.
What an opportunity.
I didn't ask
Wow.
for the job. I was assigned the job. When I
Wow.
went in the office with the treasurer and signed that little contract that they made you do in those days to work part time to go to school part,
Mhm.
I made $100 a month.
Well, were you worth it?
Looking back on it, I didn't have a clue because the people that I met in the college band, they played in the high school band because there wasn't enough there. So Troy
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
actually played Jimmy Buchanan. That's another name. Jimmy used to be band director at Silas, South Georgia, and at Bala Battery.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And
You
and
know,
he
and
was
that,
he was 3 or 4 years older than I was.
yeah.
But
You know, and,
that
and, and
the
that
truth.
that's sort of another theme that has come up a lot with there was a time where there weren't just band directors everywhere, and
Oh,
and
it
schools
was
couldn't find a
everywhere.
band director. So you
Yeah,
got guys like Jerry Bobo and
right.
Ernest Hebson who are going to class and getting in the car and going to teach band and coming back to class. And like every time they come back, they're asking their professors, I had this problem yesterday in band. How do you do this on flute? How do you
Well,
handle this problem on French horn?
didn't
And
have
it's a clinic every day.
I didn't have that privilege because GH resigned
Oh,
and
yeah.
went to Mobile selling horn, and they hired an retired opera singer at Livingston. Had no idea what a band was
Oh
or anything
my. Yeah.
about instrumentals. His name was Dr. Wild. He was a wonderful singer,
Hmm.
huge man, baritone. And the first week school was open, he knew I had that job over there. And he stopped me in the hallway there in Brock Hall and says, "Do you know how to put a clarinet together?" I said, "Yeah, I can play clarinet a little bit." He said, "Well, show me. I got to teach a clarinet lesson at the college." So I had no one to fall back on except other
Right.
students that was older than I that played in the high school band. But anyhow, I had completed 3 years of college in 2 years. My
Uh-huh.
wife got pregnant. I was also married. I haven't told you all that story, but I was also married.
Uh-huh.
And my
Wow.
wife got
Yeah.
pregnant, so she was going to have to quit her job. So I left Livingston needing 3 quarters to graduate and went
Yeah.
to Marion, Alabama at age 20, Perry County High School. And that was a wonderful community. Of course, Judson College is there,
Uh-huh.
and Marion Institute was in full swing. And they had a band at Marion Institute, did not have one at Judson. But we recruited a good class at Marion, and I had my first kids to make all state. I was so proud. I still know their name. The second year, I put 2 kids in all state. And remember, Robert E. Lee and Lanier was in our district. That's who we
Wow.
were competing
Yeah.
against.
Two
But
kicking programs and yeah.
I put a clarinet player and a bass sax player in the all state band. And I felt like I have arrived in the band business. I kind of
My
know what I'm
good.
doing, I get, but I don't know what happened to the clarinet player. His dad owned the Chevrolet dealership, and I'm sure he went on to great things because he was the valedictorian of the class. He was smart as a wheel. And the girl played bass sax, and she became a high school teacher there at Marion. She went to Judson to college, got a degree, and went right back to the school she graduated from, and made a career out of that. So
Yeah.
I've had a kind of a strange
Yeah.
background.
Well, and you mentioned you kind of whetted my appetite a little bit. You said that down in Mobile, everybody had a band except Leroy.
And Leroy's in Washington County.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a feeling there's a story there.
There is sure there, but it's going to have to come a little bit later because
Okay.
I followed James Thompson from Marion to Thomasville.
Uh-huh.
James went from Thomasville to Chatham. See, he later went to Butler too, but
Yeah.
James went to Thomasville, Chatham, and Butler.
Yeah. And see, everybody who knows James thinks, well, James happened Benjamin Russell. But what
No,
people don't know is there was a lot that happened with some of these guys before the big school that we know them for.
yeah, people don't know that James went to Jacksonville High School as principal. You didn't know that, did you?
Well, now I knew he was a principal and then went back to band.
and
But
then went back.
I did not know where he was principal
Yeah,
though.
he
But
was
yeah.
a principal.
Hmm.
But anyhow, where were we? I've lost in the years
Well,
now.
talking about James going, the various places,
Oh, I went to
Thomasville
Thomasville.
and everything. Yeah.
While I was at Marion, I was taking correspondence courses from Mississippi State, trying to fulfill a science requirement. And when I got to Thomasville, I went to Livingston one more summer quarter and graduated, and started going to graduate school at Selma at the library. So
Uh-huh.
I was teaching Thomasville one night a week, going to Selma to take a grad. James goes down there, comes to Butler, and something we did in that area that I'm so proud of. James and I and GH got together. GH had come back to Chatham by then. We organized the Tri County Honor Band, and we ran it just like the Allstate. We had our auditions, in this setting. We had our little instrumentation. We're going to have this many of this, and that. And had a concert, had a weekend rehearsal with kids from three different counties. And of course, it was just one big family to me because I knew Mr. Mate and I knew GH. I think Jimmy Buchanan was at Silas then. Anyhow, it was just a fun time, and
Sure.
we
Yeah.
just loved it, and the kids loved it. You don't see that go on anymore. It just, I don't know, these band directors don't seem to have that rapport with one another that we did. But
Uh-huh.
anyhow, after driving and doing correspondence, I left Thomasville and and at that time I had three kids below first grade, married, three kids. I quit my job and go to Tuscaloosa to graduate school. But here comes Carlton K. Butler.
There's
And
another name. It's like
he said,
all roads kind of went through Colonel Butler for a long time.
yeah, all of us went through graduate school. Might have not have gone to undergrad there, but we eventually ended up with Mr. Ellis and that great staff they had up there at that time. Anyhow, I was up there in school, had not moved my family to Tuscaloosa yet. Well, they were still in Thomasville. And Colonel Butler says they need a band director at the new junior high. And I said, what new junior high? And he had to tell me they're building a junior high in Tuscaloosa, but they want a part time guy. Would you be interested?
Mm,
Problems are solved. Not only did I get a part time job, Tuscaloosa City furnished me an apartment with all utilities paid if I would be band director. So I
wow.
moved my family from one T town to another T town. And when I got to Eastwood, they transferred a lot of those kids from junior high, Tuscaloosa junior high. And of course, Jimmy Jones was at junior high then, had a great band.
He
I
sure
got
did.
a
And then
lot of
went on
people. I had
Tuscaloosa
Dr.
High School.
Rogers, the dean of education, had his son in the band. Uh, Steve, Steve, a ranger for Alabama.
Sample? Steve
Pardon?
Sample?
Yeah, Steve's
Yep.
son was in the band.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I had Kleino's son was in the band. Dr. Kleino's son was in that band.
Remember Dr. Kleino very well. Yeah.
Most of the people in the band, their parents worked either as staff members or in some capacity with the university. And we just had a good band. I taught that, go to school in the morning and go there in the afternoon for two classes. I had a beginner band and the band. In fact,
Yeah.
can you see this watch?
Yes.
The back of this watch says to Rush Gavin from Eastwood Junior High Band.
And that was, that was quite a band. Of course, Tuscaloosa Junior High was really, really fine. It was called the
Right.
feeder high school. And for people, you think about, a college band director, has all this staff and everything. Well, in those early days, Colonel Butler was the band director at the University of Alabama and Tuscaloosa High School
That's
and
true.
Tuscaloosa Junior High all
Yeah.
at the same time.
Bodie
All
Hinton played in his high school band.
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Bodie born and raised in Tuscaloosa.
All right, now I did not know
You
that.
want to hear,
I,
I can give
I
you a Bodie Hinton story that will knock your socks off. Bodie eventually got Tuscaloosa High Band and
yes.
eventually worked up to Colonel's assistant.
Mhm.
And the Auburn job came open, and Colonel told Bodie, says, "You ought to go apply for that." And
Yeah.
Bodie, and I got this from Bodie. This came straight from Bodie because he and I were friends for many years. He said, "I told Colonel I don't want to go to Auburn. It's a little nothing town." He said, "But if you don't go and at least apply, then they may stop checking you out as a
Yeah.
serious candidate." So he makes Bodie go to Auburn. And Bodie goes down, spends a weekend in Auburn,
Mhm.
comes back to Colonel and said, "Well, I went down there and they're really nice people." Said, "But I just don't think you can build a very good program down there." And Colonel says, "Doesn't matter, Bodie, you're fired."
Oh my! Now, I didn't know that.
Because
So
Bodie
there you
told it,
have
they offered him the
yeah,
job. He said, "I
best
just,
thing for him.
yeah."
Yeah.
He said, "It doesn't matter, Bodie, you are fired."
Wow.
So Bodie had to take the job. Because Bodie said, I asked Colonel, "You're kidding, aren't you?" "No, you're fired. You do not have a position here anymore." He
Mm.
forced Bodie to go down, and what a marvelous job Bodie did
Oh,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And what a
unbelievable.
legend, what a legend.
Yeah,
And for those listening to us now, if you have not read Bodie Hinton's dissertation, you got to do that. And
yeah.
I think we have that on that Phi Beta Mu website as
Really
well.
good.
It's basically a history. Well, one chapter of it is a history of bands, first of all, in the United States, but then specifically in the state of Alabama.
Mhm.
So all of those who started a program when, what year some of these programs started, and how we got started with district contest and how state contest came about, all of that is in that one chapter of that dissertation. So it's,
Well, let
of
me
course, with him is Bodie Hinton, but Wilbur Hinton, uh, of course, was his formal name. Um, he was my mother's high school band director at Tuscaloosa
wow.
High School. Yes, and Colonel was my uncle. In other words, my mother's
Yeah.
brother. Colonel was the only director my uncle ever had. Tuscaloosa Junior High School, Tuscaloosa High School, University of Alabama, and my uncle and Steve Sample,
Mhm.
very close friends, and he taught Steve Sample Jr. private drum lessons. So, yeah, some of these
Yeah.
names, it
Well,
just,
that's what I
yeah.
referred to a while ago about we all tied together through the band business. So Bodie and my uncle GH were in graduate school together,
Uh-huh.
and they were big buddies, if you get my
Yeah.
drift, in
Yes.
those days. And they were
Yeah.
both veterans. And I met Bodie when I was still in high school through GH, but he always remembered me. GH carried me to reading clinic. You remember when we used to have the
I
reading?
remember that well. Yeah.
I was in high school and he was at Livingston. He carried me to the reading clinic, And of course, Bodie remembered me, and and all that stuff. Bodie was there, so I have a lot of connections that are just wonderful memories. I'm gonna tell you a story. There was a guy that was a road man for not Jesse French, Arts Music Shop in Montgomery, Bob Chambers.
Mhm.
And Bob was friends with Bodie and Truman Welch, and he serviced me when I was teaching at Selma. And he and I were having coffee together in the pancake house in Selma one morning. And we got around talking about Bodie and this, that, and the other. And Bob made this statement: if you don't like Bodie Hinton, something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And that's true. I don't know anybody that disliked Bodie.
Mhm.
He was
I'd
just
say
a
you're right. Yeah.
marvelous, marvelous guy. And
Absolutely.
he treated everybody the same. He was fair. And he did a lot of good things for me. He used to come stop at Selma and work the band, and talk to the kids. And that was good. I really miss Bodie.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know?
He lived well into his 90s.
Yeah, well, when I moved up here on the lake, his place is only about 2 miles from here that he had on the lake. And I was going down there almost every weekend when he and Marge would go down there. But Bodie did a lot of good things for a lot of people, and I'm one
He
of them.
sure did. He sure did.
Anyhow, wherever I know, after I got out of Eastwood, GH calls me again and he says, they're going to start a band at Leroy. And I said, good. I hope they have a lot of luck. If you've ever been through Leroy, there ain't no Leroy. There was one service station, a general store like thing connected to a service station, and two churches. All the kids were bused in from all over that side of Washington County, from the Mobile County line up to the Clark County line. But even with that, it was still a 1A school. And I said, well, oh, geez, you know, I just taught in Tuscaloosa. I wasn't going to Leroy, Alabama. I was looking at bigger and better places. And he said, no, you ought to come talk to them. I said, at least have courtesy. Okay? He said, you can stay with me. That kind. You can
Mhm.
stay with
Yeah.
me. Spend the night with me. So I went down and I talked to this gentleman named Joseph Palmer that was principal. He was a World War II vet also. He was raised in Leroy. He taught school in Leroy. He came back to Leroy as principal. And he and I hit it off just like that. And he told me, he says, they're really anxious to have a band. Chatham's had a band for X number of years. Milry's had a band. Jackson's had a band, which I was familiar with. Thomasville, everybody's had a band. Leroy, no band. So I let him talk me into it. And I went to Leroy. And they sent out a letter to all the kids that were coming in. We're starting a band at Leroy. The band director is Rush Gavin. Well, of course, everybody knows G.H. Gavin, so it's bound to be a great band.
Understood. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he laid such good groundwork for everybody. Anyhow, I started 114 beginners
My goodness.
in a 1A
Wow.
school.
Wow.
There's nothing for them to do but play football or play basketball.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they
Or back.
they were having to practice during school because all the kids were bused in.
Hmm.
I drove a bus the first year I was there. But I started 114 kids, and I made it say, I'll start you if you're in the sixth grade through the ninth grade.
Hmm.
Other than that, I just don't think, you've got enough time to.
Right.
Mr.
So that's
Palmer didn't like
114
that.
just within those grades.
Yeah.
Wow. And yeah.
Mr. Palmer said, well, I think maybe you ought to let maybe a 10th grader in. Okay. So if any 10th grader comes off to audition, because I set up a weekend on Saturday. If you want to take band, come and let me try you out, assign you to a horn, let your parents make arrangements. So when school starts, everybody will have a horn, but the horns will be delivered to the school. Will not be delivered because you'll tear the horn up before I
Heck,
can even
yeah.
open the gate.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there, and as fast as I can try kids out on horns and mouthpieces, and I've got a couple of guys from the music store, Ruts Music and Jess French, sent a salesman up so they'd have an opportunity. You want to rent from this company or this or whatever. And in comes this girl, and she said, I would like to take band. And I said, what grade are you in? 11th. I said, you're just a little too old to get started in the band. She would not get up out of the chair. She said, I'm going to take band. My sister's in the band. My younger brother's in the band. I'm going to be in the band. And I mean, and she had that look in her eye like, I'm going to sit here forever. And I said, okay, let me talk to Mr. Palmer. And Mr. Palmer was there. And he said, she's one of the smartest kids in this school. Take
Oh
her.
my. Yeah.
So I took one 11th grader. And to make a long story short, she made All State the first year, blue
Oh,
band, bass clarinet.
wow.
One, I'd had her for 7 months from time she started to try. She made the
Makes
blue band on bass
yeah.
clarinet. And the next year she made red band. She was
Wow.
brilliant.
Hmm.
She was brilliant. It's just, that's one of the success stories that I'm so proud of. But
Wow.
anyhow, Leroy was a wonderful community. We just, did things together. Mr. Palmer told me, if you need extra practice time, let me know, and I'll cut the classes down 10 minutes and give you a longer last period band class. Things like that. He sold me an acre of land off of
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
pasture next door to. I built a house next door to the principal with an acre of land cut out of a pasture.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, when you've got a principal that really wants a good band program and will support the band director, of course, a
Yeah.
lot of people know me that I was both. I was a band director, and then I also went in school administration. I was a principal, and boy, and scheduling. You got a good schedule. And like, here's a principal say, well, I'll shorten the other period so that you can have a longer band time.
Yeah.
My goodness. Reminds me of my first job, Goodwin Junior High in Montgomery, and we had two periods in the middle of the day that were 50% longer than any other periods.
Mm,
One period, the kid would have lunch and a class, and the other period, that same kid would have class slash study hall. Yeah, about a
yeah.
25-minute study
Right.
hall. Well,
I've worked
my
on that
will
system.
always put the top band on one of those two periods, but had the kids eating lunch on the other one. So I had the band slash study hall.
Yeah.
Only it was understood there was no such thing as study hall.
Right.
It
Absolutely.
was it so an hour and 10 minutes a day I had that band. And because it was on a lunch period, guess how many fire drills interrupted band? Guess how many assemblies interrupted band? Guess how many announcements
The
interrupted band? It was
principle is the
crazy.
answer to all these bad problems we're having now.
Yeah.
That plus the fact that they don't know how to sit down and interview a prospect. But I'm gonna get back to Leroy. You know, I pretty well ruled the roost down there.
Yes. Yeah.
One of the kids that I started down there ended up being Tommy Goff's junior high band director for years, Kathy Patrick.
Oh gosh, what a name there. Kathy Patrick at Auburn Junior High. Yep.
And
She was teaching as I was coming through sort of that age, junior high. Yeah. Yeah.
Kathy taught there for years. And when got involved in administration, music administration, when I moved to Columbus, I hired Kathy because we paid, but my pay was much better in Georgia than it was in Alabama. And Kathy came over there and opened up a new junior high in Columbus and still lives over there. I talk to her every week. She, I taught her brother and two of her sisters, and her mother and dad now. Well, anyhow, that's one of the success stories out of Leroy. But getting back to Leroy, I left there after 4 years, and when I left, we had 138 kids taking band
In a 1A school.
in 1A school.
My
We had
goodness.
the largest 1A school in the state, band wise.
Mm, wow.
We put kids in the all state band. Like I say, these kids had nothing else to do. But
Hmm.
one of the driving factors down at McIntosh, which is a community down below Leroy's, two chemical plants. Almost everybody that worked down there that had college degrees were from North Carolina or Virginia, and they put their kids in the band. They pushed the kid. At one time, the Leroy band had 8 members of the Auburn band. There were 8 kids marching in the Auburn band from Leroy. In fact, when Kathy went to Leroy, Bodie used to make all the kids say who you are and where you're from.
Hmm.
Kathy got over there as a freshman. She stands up and says, "My name's Kathy Patrick from Leroy." From that day on, she was known as Leroy. To this day, she's still known as Leroy.
Proud of it, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that, yeah.
proud of, but that was a really a wonderful time. But as all things change, and I loved Leroy. I built a little brick home there. And Mr. Palmer had horses in the pasture. My kid was standing at the fence, feed the horses. That was great. We just had a lot of great things going. But the fourth year I was there, Mr. Palmer and I had a meeting out at the field house because that's a set off from the school down there. And I said, Mr. Palmer, I've been offered another job, but I'm going to stay here at Leroy, but I need a raise. And if you go back and check, Washington County was one of the poorest paying counties in the state,
Uh-huh.
but it had other advantages like great people, great kids. A lot of, if I said I need, and I want to tell you this, don't let me forget this story about Frank Boykin, Congressman Boykin. He had 2 grandsons in the band. He said, I'll go to the superintendent and tell him that, and the superintendent had a grandson in the band. The next week, he got me and we went, and he got on the end of a bench and I got on another end, straddle it, face it. He says, they won't give you a raise
Oh man.
because if they give you a raise, they have to give the other 2 band directors a raise. I said, well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of in my life. He said, they won't give. I said, you mean to tell me Superintendent Pearson with a grandson in the band won't figure out some way to get me a raise to get around that stupid thing? No, they just won't give. So I left 138 kids and went to Selma. And I love Selma, but I still regret leaving Leroy.
Yeah, that's a great program, and you built it. I mean, from square one.
And a guy followed me named James Harris. He stayed there 1 year. He made ones with the band and went to Baby Net.
Mm.
And from then on, it's been downhill slide. I bet they've had 15 band directors at Leroy since I left there in '67.
Mm-hmm.
It's tragic story. But I want to tell you this one story, show you how much support I had. The second year, or just before the second year that I was at Leroy, I had an office phone. I was Mr. Palmer had a phone and Mr. Gavin had a phone. Buddy, that's high cotton there.
It sure is. Yeah.
They don't
Back
even
in,
have a phone in the Leroy band now room.
yeah, yeah. Mm.
I had a phone and Mr. Palmer had, but he had the phone ring in the office, and this voice says, "Listen, I'm so and so and so and so. I'm secretary to Senator Frank Boykin." I said, "I know Senator Boykin. I know of Senator Boykin because he was from that Mobile district for senators." He said, "He wants to talk to you." I said, "Okay." And now I don't know what's going on. And this Boykin came on and said, "My grandson tells me y'all planning on raising money to buy band uniforms." I said, "Yes, sir. That's our plan. We've got fish fry set up and a couple other things pending, but we're going to need to raise some money to buy band uniforms." He says, "How much do they cost?" I said, "I have no idea." He said, "Find out how much they cost. And when you do, call me back."
Oh my.
And I got Oswald and two or three other companies, Lewis, and to give me a bid on the band uniform like I wanted to have. And I called him back and he said, "If you'll do a concert in my honor, I'll buy them."
There you go.
He said, "How many you want to buy?" I said, "I want to buy 100 uniforms because I'm going to put 64 kids in the senior band and I need extras." He
Yeah.
says, "You do a concert in my honor." And the band wouldn't fit on the auditorium stage. Had to have it in the gym. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess we took every folded chair in that school and put it in that gym. And we honored Frank Boykin, and he wrote me a check for 100 uniforms. We never raised a dime.
Wow. That's some support. That is some support.
You just don't get that from
Mm-hmm.
every community. And they still talk about the Leroy Band.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But unfortunately, it fell on hard times.
Yeah.
And never went back to contests. It
Mm-hmm.
just got smaller. And once two or three graduations hit, and you losing 15, 20 kids at a time,
Yeah.
and
And then pretty soon
and
your kids are gone.
again. So, but I made the decision and with a broken heart to go to Selma because there had been some growing pains there as well from the political thing that was going on in Selma at the time. And I took over the band, and I won't, this person I'm going to tell you about, but I'm not giving you her name. I still remember the first band rehearsal at Albert G. Parrish High School. Yeah, they were called the Marching 100. Actually, there's only 40 of them.
I guess each one counted as 2 point something.
What they was doing, they was counting the high school and the junior high together with the chorus, I think. But anyway, I get in this rehearsal and being the maestro that I am, I said, "C concert." I
Oh
dropped
boy.
the baton and I got toot toot tweet twat blop. And I thought, well, this South Alabama brogue I picked up, they probably didn't understand. So I said, ABC concert. Got the same reaction. I said, well, they just don't know that. I said, F concert. Got the
Surely we
same.
know that, right?
Really, everybody knows F concert. Same thing. First chair flute player looks up at me and said, Mr. Gavin, do you want us to play the tuning note scale? The tuning note
Union
scale.
notes. Yeah.
I said, whatever y'all call it, let's play it.
Okay.
That was my introduction to the Selva band. Oh, I'm going to
Uh,
tell you who that was.
that's yeah.
I know you
Oh,
want to know. Susie Perrin,
hmm
Susie Winter,
who married somebody else in your band.
Ski Winter,
So,
Mike Thomas come out of that band.
so
John
that
Lamb,
so that little flute player that was asking the tuning note scale. That's Sue
tuning,
Winter.
that was Susie.
Yeah. Yeah. And then and
I have a lot of wonderful memories of. Well, I just tell you, I was at Selma 7 years, and the 7 years we went to state every year. Didn't make ones every year, but we, because I always had to play either behind Blanche or behind Tommy Goff, and I did not like that. And I
yeah,
complained about that several times. Of all people, can you put me first and let them play behind me? Never failed. I was either behind Blanche, I was behind Tommy Goff.
right. Yeah. And see, a lot of people don't remember the days of state contest where you went to
Right.
district, then you went to state contest,
That proves
and
you have a band.
and all of the double A bands played back to back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
All the A bands played back to back to back. So you were listening to the big boys,
Right.
one after the other. Sometimes they were playing at least one of the same tunes.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it was
Well, that was in the days where, you had to pick one or the other tune. You can either play this as your required number or this as your required number. You
yeah,
know, that's so far removed from what they do now. I don't even want to
right.
get in.
Oh,
Glenn
oh,
School
oh
and I,
yeah.
we've cussed that so many years. It's pitiful.
Oh yeah. And if you go back and you look at some of those early state contest programs,
Yeah,
it'll say like class C, and then it'll list each band with two numbers. Because
yeah,
the third number, every class C band is
right.
playing that required number.
Yeah,
So, a real apples to apples. And if you were a double A band, you're gonna have to play the,
yeah.
Hold Sweet Now or
Stayed
whatever it
home.
was.
You either played it or stayed home.
Absolutely. It's like, well, we've got a big school, but we can't play that.
Yeah,
Well, then you're not going to state contest.
yeah,
When the program gets to that level,
yeah.
then come on. So
I'm going back to almost the beginning. The
yeah.
first band I ever took to I'm gonna go back when I was at Livingston High School. The first band I played against at a football game was Utah, Alabama, under Professor Breer, Vince
Mhm.
Breer's dad, and that band sounded like an organ. And I went home sick at my stomach because Livingston band did not sound like an organ. But anyhow, you're right about that. But to go further into this thing with Selma, we we really went to work. The kids were ready for something to happen,
Huh?
and I said I want to do something different. And I had never done this before, but I said we're gonna march 6 to 5. They didn't even know how to march 8 to 5, so it really didn't make any difference. But I said, we're going to march 6 to 5. and we're going to do the same thing in bands that march 8 to 5 with Moffett stuff or line drill. We can do it, and we can do it better.
Mhm.
And it'll be to our advantage when we go to marching contest because
Okay.
you didn't see in Alabama, you didn't see 6 to 5 bands.
You didn't.
There
It was
was
8 to 5. Yeah. And
everybody do it at 8 to 5,
and six
and
to five, you get down the field a whole lot faster.
a lot faster.
Yeah, yeah. And if you watch, Texas A&M today, yeah,
Well,
it's
I
six
had
to five.
I had two groups that influenced me to do that: Texas A&M and M and the Casper Troopers out of Casper, Wyoming.
All right.
Coming.
Now I never knew that the troopers marched 6 to 5, but yeah,
First
of
time I
course.
saw the Casper Troopers was in New Orleans. No, it was in Houston, Texas, and they had two company fronts from sideline to sideline, and they brought them all the way down past the reviewing stand and back, and it looked like they were all nailed together. I've never, and I got chills just then. I'm still impressed with the Casper Troopers. They're not the core they used to be, but that helped us a lot as far as recognition. Some guy from Florida came up to Selma when we were having our own marching contest as a fundraiser and filmed the Selma band and took it down to the Florida Bandmasters Association. And it was shown down there for 3 or 4 years later after that. And I'm not bragging, we were just really different and we were really good. In
Mhm.
fact, I talked to a guy today in Columbus, Georgia, that was in a high school band and saw that film. He played my National Guard band years ago. He said, I knew you when I was still in high school.
Yeah,
My band
yeah,
director showed us a film of the Selma band.
right. Yeah.
It
And of
was,
course, ski winner there in your band who made the McDonald's All-American band.
and Tony McCutcheon.
Okay. Yeah. And
You
and
know
and
Tony McCutcheon. If you don't, shame on you.
I know the name. We have never we
Tony would come out of the Lanier band. He was in the All American band with Ski. Ski and Tony both was in my guard band.
wow.
Tony went to Mississippi State as a graduate student, or Ole Miss. Got his master's. No, may have this back. I took him to East Carolina to enroll in the master's program and study with that keyboard guy up there that used to be so fantastic. And then he came back, worked at Auburn, and went to Ole Miss and got his master's, his doctorate. For years, Tony was the percussion instructor at the University of Georgia, retired, went to Jack State and became the head of the music department.
Mhm.
I mean, that's another story of what I call one of my kids.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tony
Absolutely.
one day.
And
We were
and now during the Selma years, now that's when you became ABA president.
right. I was vice president under golf.
Okay.
The year
Yep.
Tommy was president, I was vice president. And then the next year I became president.
Mhm.
And that's when we made the changes, not only in the presidency, but also in how the districts were established for all state band and how we run districts for district contests.
Well, talk to us a little bit about that because this is now about the time that I'm starting band as a junior high
Yeah.
kid. And so I'm kind of living
In
these
that
changes
era.
coming along. So tell us about like the redistricting,
Well,
the
what we
philosophy.
did, and Blanche Simmons had a lot to do with it. What really motivated me was Blanche had a tremendous band at Fairhope, and the Foley band was good.
Hmm? Oh yeah.
Then Davidson was good, and Murphy was good, Viger was good. Glenn Spiller can tell you about the Viger band. Glenn and I both went to school at Viger. But anyhow, they were leaving much better players at home because we had every district could only get so many people.
Right. Yeah.
There was other districts, and the Wiregrass district is one of them, did not have that many strong bands. They had Dothan, and
Hmm.
that was about it.
Yeah.
And Dothan had good bands, but they didn't have all state players in every chair.
Mhm.
And it was just a numbers thing. So we started doing a survey what schools participate, what schools did not participate in all state. If you participate, how many kids tried out, how many
Mhm.
made it. We went through this whole thing and we came to the conclusion that we needed to spread Mobile and Fairhope and Baldwin County apart
Mhm.
and move Fairhope and Baldwin County over in that District 8 and move. District 6 used to go from Chatham next to Mobile all the way up to Livingston,
Mhm.
all the way over to Montgomery with Robert E. Lee and Lanier.
Here. Yeah.
It was a huge district,
Yes.
but they only had one or two good schools in it.
Mhm.
And they were taking kids from bad bands just to fill the quota when these other districts like Huntsville and Birmingham at that
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
Birmingham was a hotbed for bands in my era. I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah. Absolutely.
my
Yeah.
high school would scare you to death.
Yeah. Johnny. Yeah. Johnny Jacobs. You had
And then
Shades.
Hoover comes along. Ted Galloway goes to Berry High School of all places. And they were leaving much better players at home than some of
Abs.
these other districts. So we started trying to not only improve the quality of the all-state bands, but give these good players a better opportunity.
Mhm. Well,
And then out of
thinking
that,
back.
we changed the solo and ensemble too.
Thinking back as a kid, I remember seeing a map of the state of Alabama and the districts. And it was like District 1 was Madison County. And that was it. It was a district unto itself. And I wondered, why is that? And then Tommy Brandon told me, he said, well, it's based on the number of kids who are trying out for Allstate. So I says, in other words, you got as many people in Madison County trying out for Allstate
Oh,
as in this whole area down here combined. He said, that's exactly right. Yeah.
same thing
Yeah.
with Jefferson County.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Jefferson County back in those days was really, really good from a high school band standpoint.
Hmm. Yes,
And,
they were.
it was just not fair the way it was being done. And Blanche helped me promote that statewide so that we could get it passed through and put in the bylaws. Originally, and I know this because GH was involved in the original ABA meetings. Uh, they just had District 1 according to the congressional district. District 2, we had 8 congressional and that's where the bands were. Had nothing to do with how many schools was in each district
Yeah.
or anything about it. It was totally based on congressional district. And then I feel like we flipped the coin on that, and the bands greatly improved. The all-state bands were greatly improved because of it, because more really, really good players had an opportunity to be selected.
Hmm.
But still, it's pretty cutthroat in the all state.
Oh yeah. And Rush, think about Allstate, and I'm trying to remember when this changed. But there was a point at which the same director did the red band and the white band. And then the blue band would be someone in state, Colonel Butler or Bodie Hinton. Um,
I don't remember that. That must have been after my time.
that was way on back. Cause, and another thing for those listening, we got all those old all state programs
Oh,
over on
did
the Five Beta website.
mhm.
Yeah. And the way they would stagger the rehearsals. So that first night where the red band players were trying out for chairs, blue band went ahead and had a rehearsal.
Yeah.
And then the next morning, white band's trying out for chairs. And so you got one guy who's having to rehearse the red band and the white band, and they just staggered the rehearsals so that it could happen. But that was one of those
Well, one of
interesting.
the other things we were able to change in the ABA bylaws when I was first teaching, they held solo and ensemble in conjunction with the state
A
contest.
contest.
So,
Yes.
if you had a lot of kids wanting to be in solo and ensemble, you had to schedule them a different day from and you might have to spend a night in Tuscaloosa because of that. Or you have to hurry up and get your solo and ensemble over with because the band's got to warm up to go on the stage. It was chaos,
Hmm.
literally chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just moved the solo and ensemble completely away from
Hmm.
state contest. And I I know it helped because Gene Gooch called me that first year we did it. He said we tripled the amount of money we made on medals.
Oh, I can imagine. I can
Or
imagine. Yeah.
participate.
Because back when it was part of state contest, it would be just a very few number of kids, and for a while they were actually listed by name in the state contest
Yeah,
program.
yeah.
It was just a very small number, and then yeah, and now you really get when I was coming through junior high, that change must have just happened because that first years in the
Well,
eighth grade when I went to solo and ensemble, it was like at the region level. And then I think a year later, it went to at the district level. And,
Well, we changed that in either 72 or 73.
mhm,
Is when and that was
yeah,
also the time we went from a 1 year tenure for the president to a 2 year tenure. I really didn't want the second year.
hmm,
I was, I had other things in the fire. I had the National Guard band. I had the Selma band. I was repairing horns for Z's Music in Selma. My plate was already full. I didn't want to do it to say, but when we passed the law that we was going to extend it from 1 to 2 years, I actually called for a vote on that thing.
hmm.
Do you want to start it now, or do you want to put it in effect beginning next year? And they just put me back in there. So I had that honor really
Yeah.
of being the first one to ever serve the 2 years. And,
Rush,
and
there
I think
was
we just made it a lot better for the kids. I know we made it a lot simpler for the band directors.
another thing that happened, and it may have been, it was right about that time. Um, at state contest, your overall rating was your three on stage ratings. Whereas now, you've got three on stage, you got sight reading. So if you can get two ones in there somehow, two ones and two twos in any combination gives you the one. Up until that time, if you made a 1 2 2 on stage, that was a two. You made a one in sight reading. Well, that's great. That's wonderful. But you still got a two.
Yeah,
So
we
was
changed
that
that every year. That was,
and so yeah.
and it wasn't only me. Frank Kende wasn't happy up at S.R. Butler.
Mhm,
You know, Frank McCarthy was not happy at Tuscaloosa. I
mhm.
mean, in these big schools, they were really fighting with these things that was going. But and it's nobody's fault. It was just a growing process. We just outgrew the
Mhm.
original bylaws and had more
Absolutely.
schools, more participation, many more people participating. And when we took the solo and ensemble away from state contest, that that participation just mushroomed. Those
Absolutely.
kids would go, kids that couldn't play in a real good band, they could go and get a medal in a solo and ensemble setting. But if they, it just worked out better all the way around, I think.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and and solo and ensemble, just over the years, it just continued to grow and grow, and um, it was something important to me as a kid coming through, and I remember, I remember playing for people like Colonel Butler, flute duet, me and a friend, a junior high friend, playing for Colonel Butler.
Well, one thing
Uh,
I was going to tell you, going way back, the first band I took to contest was the Marion
mhm.
County High School, and I'd been there 2 years. It was my second year, and the contest was held at Lanier.
Mhm.
Lanier has a beautiful auditorium. I don't know if you've ever been in it,
Oh yes. Oh
but
yes.
but we went over there. We were a Class C band, and I can still remember because I still get real nervous when I think about it. The judges was Bodie Hinton, Carlton K. Butler, and Yale Ellis. I was almost sick on my stomach. And I remember when I did like this to start the march, my hand was shaking and I had to put it back down and kind of breathe deeply. I was literally scared to death. But somehow, I got them going and we played and we got through the thing. And in those days, there was a place at the bottom of the adjudicator sheet for comments
Private.
on
The
private
dir-
comments
yeah.
for the director. And all three of them wrote the same thing. I wish I'd kept that, but I didn't. I left it in there. It says, "We really enjoyed your band and they play well, but I think it would be better if you did not go, although we're going to recommend you that you not go to state with this group." They knew more about bands than I did, see.
Mhm.
They knew that they'd probably eat us alive if we cared. And I did not take them, but I got
Mhm.
recommended.
Yeah.
And that meant a lot to me. But I still remember that's one of the most horrifying days of my life. You
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
see those three on many panels.
Oh yeah. And for those coming through today, back in those days, you went to district contest first, and I would get roughly maybe half the bands would be recommended. Of course, it would vary from district to district,
Yeah,
year to year, but roughly half the bands would not be recommended to go
right.
any further, with the criteria being, with 6 more weeks of normal continued development, could this band make a 1 or a 2 at
That's
state
right.
contest? So, so at state contest, the worst band there had gotten through district. So you didn't have any bad
That's right. There
bands.
was no bad bands.
And
Right.
most of the bands at state contest would make a 2 or a 3. Fours were rare because they'd gotten through district.
Yeah,
So a 4 was pretty rare. But ones, if you made a superior, that was that was head and shoulders. You might
right.
go the whole morning and one band would make a superior. Um, so
I'll tell you a story you don't even know about. One year, and I can't remember the year, sight reading was a tune entitled Prelude to a Tragedy, Class A.
Uh, okay.
John Kendrick was sight reading judge, which he was for many years. John used to be associate band director at Alabama way back. But the name of the tune was Prelude to a Tragedy, and it started with a tenor drum solo.
And that's sight reading.
Rush Gavin made a two.
Yeah.
Tommy Goff made a two. Blanche Simmons made a two. It was one of those things dealing with the Civil War, and from the beginning, all the highs had oboe solos in it, had weird combinations, tubas and clarinets, just all these. I bought it.
Mm-hmm.
I bought it, and I couldn't play it after I'd rehearsed it.
And that was sight reading.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
But
Rush,
in those days, you see, that sight reading score couldn't pull your other score down unless it was a three.
right. Yeah. You could only make
One
your overall could be one division higher. So if you made a one, 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 and a
and a
three in
three,
sight reading,
you made
you
it
got
two.
it, which is still there, although
They
you really don't
don't.
see three in sight,
They don't
you know.
do that.
Yeah.
I don't know what they do, but I don't attend those anymore. And I
Yeah.
know several other directors who are telling me they refuse to judge because
Well, I think there is a rubric, um, with things like intonation problems that resolve. Well, that's a one. Well, it used to be intonation problems. That was a two. If they resolved, if they didn't, it was something worse.
that's
That
right.
that so it's it's really where you really can't compare scores from several decades ago with scores now. Just and of course now with it, it's a one shot. With you just bring your band. So whereas half the bands would not be recommended for state contest,
Well, let me
now
tell you
several
something else.
make a
Something
superior. Yeah.
we did compared to what I see going on. And of course, I'm not involved like I once was, but I always tried to figure out some way to take my band somewhere they'd never been.
Mm-hmm.
Every band I ever directed, I carried them to a college campus and played. Even the Leroy band, I did two homecomings for
Yeah.
Livingston State. They didn't have a band. I went up and did two homecomings. I played up at Jackson State. You know, carried kids to Auburn to band day. Always tried to expand their thinking about, there's more than Butler, Alabama, or there's more than Thomasville or Selma. The Selma band, because we got pretty proficient, we went to contests in Georgia, Florida, and Mississippi and Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
I played Murphy one year at Glad Stadium when I was, and we went to Biloxi and marched in a contest on Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I always tried to give the kids something different from what they did. A lot of the Leroy kids would have never gone to
Oh, of course not. Yeah. Yeah. It was a small town like that.
go right
Yeah.
there at the paper mill at Jackson and go to work, or go down to McIntosh, two chemical plants and go to work. Had I not carried them to the Auburn campus several times, they would have never been there. And I've had them tell me that, if it hadn't been for the band, I would have never gotten out of the county. I'll tell you something else that we did when I was ABA that I take a lot of pride in it. Back when you were in junior high or high school, for Allstate, we would hire Ravelli to come in, or we'd hire, this guy come
Mhm,
in, somebody coming from Florida State. One year, I put together what I call the Alabama Festival, and I hired Alabama college directors for the All-State Band. Frank MacArthur gave a clinic on woodwinds that was excellent. I mean, I
mhm,
learned a lot from Frank. I can't remember who was at Howard or not. Yeah, at Samford at that time. But I know Dave Walters did an arranging clinic.
mhm. Oh boy, and he could arrange. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah,
and uh, Colonel Butler did one of the All-State bands. Bodie did the white band. Johnny Long did the blue band.
there's another great one. Yeah.
And we used all Alabama people to educate Alabama educators.
Mhm.
And I thought that went over real well. I know it helped the colleges because if you're the band director at Livingston, you probably don't get to stand in front of all the band directors in the state very often, if ever.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
I'm
Yeah.
the only, and I'm gonna say this because I'm a boast. I'm gonna brag. Can I pat myself on the back?
Sure.
I'm the only living. I'm the only Livingston graduate that was ever ABA president,
All right. Yeah.
and I'm real proud of that.
As you should be. As you should be.
Just real proud of that.
Well, Rush, I tell you, this has, I have enjoyed every minute that we
Well,
have spent
I mean,
together. And I
you ought to
know,
get a conversation with Glenn and I.
oh,
Boy, we
yeah, yeah.
could really go way off.
Because Glenn, of course, Glenn and I did an interview very, very, very similar to this, and of course, nobody tells a story like Glenn Spiller does. And so
Did he
for those
tell you
of
how I met him?
no, no, you did, yeah. How did that happen?
Glenn was at Taylorsville, and he got
Mississippi, okay.
Mississippi. And he got the Butler job, and of course, I was at Selma and had graduated, and I always kept up who's at Butler.
Mhm.
And I called over there and introduced myself. I said, Glenn, my name's Rush Gavin. I'm a graduate of Butler. I said, I want you to join the ABA. He says, what's the ABA? I said, well, it's a bandmasters group of band directors in the state. And I think reading clinic was coming up. I said, I'd like for you to go to reading clinic with me and meet some of the guys because he didn't know what. He knew a few people in Mobile, of course, from growing up down there. But that's how I introduced Glenn to the ABA was when he went to Butler and went up to that. And of course, Glenn and I
Absolutely.
became real close friends, and he and James and I were close, and we had
Yeah,
our own
James.
little fraternity,
Yeah.
really.
No, and when you listen to these guys, like Glenn's interview, for example, when he talked about being at Livingston, and of course, every university now has an honor band, but it didn't used to be that way.
Right.
And Glenn, who started that Livingston honor band and getting kids on campus,
Yeah.
that was an out of the box kind of thing,
Yeah.
back then. And everybody knows that. Well, Glenn, Decatur High School, yeah, he stepped into a great situation. Well, but then you back up and you look at where Glenn had been
Right.
going all the way back. And the thing that stands out to me, like in this interview, in Glenn's interview, and all the interviews with these giants, has been that you did the best you could with what you had at the time.
Right.
And I think the challenge for all of us today is that same thing, to do the best you can with what you have in a day and age when you have so much more
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
put the excuses aside, put the we can't have a band in this community that's going to be good because of this. Use what you got, do the best that you can. So I think that's the challenge that's ahead. And I know a lot, I've been referring to the website. So for those that don't already know what I'm talking about, Phi Beta Mu put together a website. It's Phi Beta Mu dot RHO because Alabama's the Row chapter dot
Hmm.
org. So PBM dot RHO dot org. Hope I got that right.
Yeah.
And so there, you
And
know,
anyway,
they, they'll see the bios for the people who are in the Hall of Fame and pictures of them. In many cases, a link to a band recording for them. You'll also see the state contest programs out there. You'll also see the all state programs there. To tell you a quick story there, I never in a million years wanted to tackle trying to put together all the all-state programs. It'd been so tough finding all those state contest programs going back to the 50s and so forth. I said, there's no way I'm going to tackle the other. And with Truman, there was one little clue for me as to why Truman had the success that he did. And it was a little message from the grave. I mentioned that collecting the state contest programs and how trying to do the same thing with all state would just be such a daunting task. I mean,
yeah,
who's going to handle this program? When Truman passed away, his son Milton brought me a bunch of tubs. He said, Frank, just look through these, just see what there might be that would be
Truman
useful to
had
you.
a wealth
But
of material.
there were all kinds of notebooks of Xeroxed articles from the instrumentalists. Here were all these flute articles, and here were all these claims. He was a student of the game,
It really was.
always trying to get better. And then I opened this file folder that looked pretty important because it was like the contents had been hole punched and bound into this file folder. I open it up, and there's an all-state program 1950.
Yeah.
Right behind that, 51, 52, 53, everyone up through the end of the 1960s. And I thought if Truman Welch can give us that kind of head start, I believe I can take it from there. So because of Truman and what he did and left us, we can all go to that one website from the comfort of our own homes and enjoy all of those all-state programs going all the way back to the late 40s.
I wish I had Mr. Ellis's notebook where he kept all those jokes. Mr. Ellis, if he heard a good joke, he'd always write it in his little notebook, put it in his pocket. He must have had 1,000 jokes. He was a
Absolutely.
collector of jokes. I'm gonna ask you a question. And did you ever hear Truman's band play, his high school band?
Not in person, but I have heard recordings.
Is that a unique sound or what?
Yes. Yes.
I asked Truman, and this was years after he retired, and I had retired too. I went over to visit him at his house. I said, Truman, how did you get that unique woodwind sound? I said, I said, I've always admired it, but I never understood how I couldn't make my woodwind. He said, the secret is double the clarinets on the flutes.
Because he always had a very large flute section. And of course, and
And,
he was a flute player, outstanding flute player.
and like Bobo, he had a large clarinet section. He
Mhm.
would double the flute parts with clarinets.
Mhm. Absolutely. Instead of having everybody sitting up there in the ledger lines, you know,
Huh?
have some harmony going on. It works for the clarinet section. It works for the trumpet section. It works for the flute section as well. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
talked, I talked to, God, names leave me sometimes. Jack State.
Well, of course, Dave Walters was there.
I talked to Dave one time about arranging, And he said, well, one thing that I do different, I think, he said, I always write in octaves for the tubas.
Huh. Okay.
That's where that
I,
bright brass sound came from. I always write in octaves for the tubas.
my goodness. I never,
He says, and then I write in octaves for the euphoniums above them.
okay.
Axle.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. This has
It's,
been amazing. This has been amazing.
I've enjoyed it. I've looked forward to this from the first time Clinton because I did grow up, and I literally grew up in the band business. When you start teaching at 18, you kind of grow up.
Yeah. Hey,
And
yeah.
I had an opportunity to meet a lot of fine people. But GH was the beginning of the band world in West Alabama. Blanche was the introduction to females in the band business for
Mhm.
Alabama, and she held the bar real high too.
Sure did. Oh my gracious.
Real
Oh,
high, and I appreciate it, and I'll always be grateful to Mr. Addison. He did so
absolutely.
much for me. And when you play for him at 10 years old, and then he comes to see you at your retirement
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
50 years later, that's a pretty long relationship there.
absolutely.
Well, I'd go back and do the band business again. I miss it to this day. I couldn't hold the baton steady, and I couldn't stand on the podium, but I still miss it.
Oh, absolutely. So many good things. And
Yeah.
so for whoever has stumbled on this interview today and has stuck with us through to the end, I hope you're coming away with some tips you can use that are going to make your band better and an appreciation for all the people that have gone before us that have given us what we have now. And now we lay down the gauntlet for what are you going to do to take what we have now and take it to the next level. So this has been Frank Buck. And again, my thanks to my friend Rush Gavin for his time to share this wonderful information about some of the things that have brought us up to where we are now. So, Rush, thanks again.
It's been an honor for me, Frank. Thank you.